You're listening to the Reversing Climate Change podcast by the team at Nori, the carbon removal marketplace. This is a show about the innovators and entrepreneurs developing solutions to climate change.
Hello and welcome to the Reversing Climate Change podcast with Nori. I'm Ross Kenyon. I'm one of the co-founders of Nori, which is what exactly do we? We're a carbon removal marketplace in Seattle, Washington. We have a guest from Washington. Oh my God, we're about to break the fourth wall for someone who's been listening for so long. Was this the very first carbon removal thing ever in your life? I'm pretty sure. Anyways, Siobhan, introduce our guest. I'm so happy that we finally are doing this.
Hey everybody, today we have with us Jason Grillo, who is the Director of Partnerships and Operations at AirMiners, a organization that is near and dear to our heart. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It is, as you said, Russ, it is kind of coming full circle to a podcast that was, tracking back about 4 years ago was really important for me understanding carbon removal to begin with.
I love that. It's so nice. Every time I talk to you and it comes up, I'm always just like, wow, because podcasting, you never know. You're just sort of talking, you release it to the internet, unless someone tells you you have numbers that are disembodied and who knows what good it's doing. And someone's like, hey, I got really into carbon removal, at least partially due to your work. I'm just like, yes. And now you're like a pillar. There's like not that many people that I associate as strongly with carbon removal.
Tell us the story, because not to be too congratulatory to the show, but tell us the story of how you got into air mining and how you found AirMiners, because I
found AirMiners. Oh, it is quite interesting. So, let's see. So I actually spent most of my career in biotech, biopharm, and healthcare with a stint in clean tech 1.0, and that time was pretty much in solar, but went to clean tech stuff, like I said, 2009, 10, 11, and then back into healthcare again from during kind of this nuclear winter-ish type time for the clean tech industry, during which time it morphed into climate tech. And then
really
around 2000,
when the first bubble burst,
exactly.
Huh, okay.
So professional in marketing, market research in particular, and then I struck out. I did my own LLC to do marketing projects for climate tech and solar companies, starting in renewable energy companies rather in 2019, and then I just learned about carbon removal partly through your podcast and learned about AirMiners because I think you interviewed Tito at one point. I thought, oh wow, what a cool community.
Was that when you were doing the bracelet? Was that like
yes.
I remember
the bracelet is an important part of the story actually, because I wound up buying a bracelet on Tito's Kickstarter, or funding his operations through Kickstarter, and then I went to apply to AirMiners, and one of the things that we still ask on the forum is, what's your interest in carbon removal, and ask you one of several categories you're in. And I didn't have any experience in carbon removal, and I said, well, let's see, are you, and one of the items is funder or investor. Wait a minute, I funded Tito's carbon removal startup, I am therefore a funder, QED. And so
just salivating at this application, being like, oh, here comes money bags over here, and it's just you.
And that's how I got into AirMiners in the fall of 2019. And then shortly after that, Tito put out a call to have people ask about what would the community want to have as its next step in the process. And I helped with Tito and Grant Faber actually field the first AirMiners user survey in January of 2020. Note, right before the pandemic loveliness started. And then at that point, what bubbled up again prior to pandemic was, hey, let's do virtual meetings, because it's such a widely geographically disparate group of people, and also makes more sense from just a carbon neutrality standpoint, carbon negativity standpoint, I should say.
Yeah.
And so we set on doing a conference in May of 2020, just as we were heading into lockdown. And that's how I got into carbon removal and how I started to do the event series, and things have kind of grown from there.
Asking how you got into carbon removal very much sounds like how I spent my summer vacation as a prompt, Siobhan.
Well, I was really going for the juicy, this show changed my life, because after hearing Tito, all the balls started rolling.
Well,
But that is, I think,
it did kind of, because I thought that, okay, great, there's a community of people who specifically do this, and it's such an early stage of developing an industry that I could have an effect there. I mean, again, I'm going to put on my, way back in the fall of 2019, AirMiners was only 400 people in the Slack community. I remember
but
like it
it's
was
true,
yesterday.
man.
It is, and now we're okay, and now we're over 2,200, and so it's grown quite a bit.
And you guys curate
And
that too. Like, it's not just like you get in, like you have to apply for this. You have to demonstrate
yeah.
some sustained interest, I think, right?
And now we have the Bootup, plug for Bootup, bootup.airminers.org, bootup.airminers.org. For those who are interested in getting involved in carbon removal, don't know too much about the industry and want to have that nice entry point. And that's, I guess, part of the culture that we want to develop as well, that to have that place where people can have a start in carbon removal, even if they don't know anything about the principles of carbon removal, methods, the underpinnings, and where they see a place for themselves in the industry, which is still, I mean, yeah, great to see the growth over the last 3 or 4 years here, but still very much in its early stages.
If you're just starting out and you're listening to this show, you clearly care about carbon removal. Bootup. I mean, we ask new Nori knots to go to it, assuming they're willing to, because it is such, it's a great onboarding experience. Oh, by the way, Siobhan Montoya Lavender of Thanks a Ton, and also a long-term AirMiner. Sorry,
long-term AirMiner. I think I was 600 people when I joined.
Wow.
Yes.
It's like
and we also have a bunch of interns that come through Thanks a Ton. I think we're on like intern 18 or something. And we tell them that they can bill intern hours to go to Bootup if they want to learn about carbon removal.
No kidding. That's cool. Awesome. Thank you for that. And thank you for Thanks a Ton as well, which we use quite frequently too.
Yes, thank you. You're our biggest supporters.
As gratitude for people who help out with things in our ideas, needs, and leads, and in other pursuits that we're engaging in.
Well, I mean, that ties in really nicely to what we wanted to talk about here, because you're one of the people I know who cares a lot about culture, cares a lot about community. Siobhan and I both, I mean, we're like communications weirdos here. It's like we think it's important to do. You're also the only person who's ever gotten my cultural victory civilization reference with regard to I do what I do.
Yeah, well, I go back to Peter Drucker's old phrase that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Oh,
Peter Drucker's a management guru from quite a long time ago, whose insights are still extraordinarily prescient and useful for my management ethos, where again the purpose of any business is to create a customer. Hey, but yeah, thinking about culture, people don't leave, or the other phrase that comes to mind, people don't leave organizations, they leave cultures. I don't like the way things are happening here, and we want to craft the community so that it's accepting of others, so that it's inclusive, so that we have a way of getting to people who are in different geographies, in different methods of carbon removal, from all sorts of different backgrounds, and to have that entry point, to have it be inclusive and permeable. The industry needs this. We don't need to, we don't want to like shove people away. Like, no, you can't, you don't have the workers at 5 years of carbon removal experience. Pro tip, no one does, or virtually no one does.
I have 6 years, damn it. 6 years.
Yes,
I would
virtually no one does. Yeah, I mean, I could probably, most people are extraordinarily new, which is exciting, because it means that there are all sorts of new ideas that we can cultivate in the community, and make sure that they have a place and to grow and develop. I mean, geez, I'm just thinking back to it wasn't even 2 years ago when we had our biomass burial event, and now biomass burial has a methodology on Puro.
Yeah.
That it can happen that quickly. I think about you had Octavia Carbon on, and Octavia was plug here, a Launchpad team, as was Sella, and they met in Launchpad, and they met together in Launchpad maybe at like 18 months ago. Again, we're recording this in August of 2023, but yeah, it was like 18 months ago or something when they were in Launchpad together, and now they're going in a partnership for Project Hummingbird, which is just fantastic. So again, it's those kinds of connections that we really, really want to foster in AirMiners. That's why we do what we do. That it's a small enough space that people can truly know each other, not just know of each other, if the semantic difference makes sense.
It sounds so small. I've seen recently at TED Countdown, I saw Jonathan Foley talk about how carbon removal gets too much attention and too much funding. And then you say something like, the premier carbon removal community has 2,200 members. And like, and then there's Open Air Collective too. So a couple thousand on top of that. So there's like several thousand people. And if you compare the amount of money that goes towards decarbonization, other types of climate tech versus carbon removal, it's like nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I think culturally it just captures the imagination in the thought of.
It owns more mind share than it deserves to in some cases, maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, going back to maybe like 4 years ago when I started, 3.5, 4 years ago when I started here, is that you're using a pollutant as a resource.
Yeah.
And that is so. To me, I just find I just am continually amazed at how ingenious that framing is. That was in place when that I latched onto when I first started to learn about carbon removal. Taking something that is considered an externality, a bad thing, and you're crafting it into a credit that can have economic benefit, or that confers economic benefit, or a product in the case of CO2 that goes into consumer goods or industrial products.
Yeah, I'm curious, Jason. I feel like this is going to be hard for me not to have a huge AirMiners love fest on this show, because I love it.
That's fine. Go for it.
But I think it would be disingenuous for me to pretend that I don't. And I think, is this your first time building a community, you and Tito? Because you have to say, for building a community, which I'm part of various climate communities, I think we all are. And I sometimes think there's a lot of like pizzazz on the exterior, but you get inside and it's kind of dead and there's not a lot happening, or there's not a lot of earnest connections being made.
Yeah.
That's not the case at AirMiners. AirMiners, I feel like is flourishing to a certain degree. I'm sure there's struggles that I want to hear about.
Yeah.
But I also feel like everybody I send to AirMiners or I meet through AirMiners loves AirMiners and loves you, to be honest. They say, well, they're just so welcoming. Jason and Tito always are like so genuine and kind and helpful. So how did you get into planning a community? Do you have a background in this at all?
We drew up every single step of the way from the very get-go with detailed precision that we've followed in lockstep. No. There's been you're snickering, and there's a good reason because there's a lot of pivoting that happened along the way. I would say, for Tito, he had his experience at running the BioCurious community in Northern California.
All organizations should be pun-based, by the way.
Yes.
Hell yeah.
Well, like I said, again, happiness is a worn pun.
Yeah.
As they say. It's a feature, not a bug.
I can't allow
it's
you
a feature, not a bug.
Like okay. All right. Back to the thread here.
So Tito has experience from working in biotech in his own DIY biotech community, and for me, I actually have an origin in the biopharma community as well, only a shade earlier. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, I was working in biotech in Boston, and it just seems like everybody kind of knew everybody else. There were 3 or 4 major biopharmaceutical companies in the Kendall Square area of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they're in line of sight of each other. If you are familiar with that place and just walk around, you can see these major biotech firm, another major biotech firm, another major biotech firm. They've got lab space, they've got office buildings, and someone is a director at some company and they go on to become vice president of a smaller company and then build it. So there's kind of these trees from like 3 or 4 seminal biopharmaceutical companies in the area, and it just seemed like everyone could develop you could develop a good reputation of working with someone, for someone, under someone. And that kind of carried forward into my own thinking about how to build a community, that it's carbon removal is certainly small enough that people just know each other, extraordinarily well. 2,200 people, yes, it's growing, but it's still small enough that you can have an effect. I've talked to someone recently about what we do in Air, because at the end of the day, it's about hope. And so much of we find that a lot of the climate discourse is talks about kind of doomerism here, that we're in trouble. I mean, not saying we're not in trouble, newsflash, we kind of are. That said, the ability to choose how we react to it is something that we wanted to give to people in the community, like to have people feel like they have agency is a great way of alleviating that climate anxiety. Peter Olivier had a tweet about this maybe a week or so ago, that 80% of climate anxiety disappears when you start actually working in climate. Doesn't always disappear, not all the way, but we wanted to build a community that where people can have a voice. And that's why we built stuff like Bootup, like Launchpad. By the way, speaking of Launchpad, applications due August 11th for Launchpad.
What is Launchpad
August
for those
11th,
listening
okay.
who don't know? Yeah, and then we'll get back to
Yeah, so Launchpad is our accelerator program for teams who are on the early stage of their journey in carbon removal, so that people can grow and develop their launch their early stage company. We'll work with them for 6 weeks over the course of over the course of the program, and then have the teams graduate and then get to two investor day, two demo days rather. One for investors, the other one for carbon removal credit buyers, and you get one shot at each of them, guaranteed. You don't have to go immediately, but you're always guaranteed one shot at each. And program's free to participate in.
And how many teams have you had so far?
We've graduated 95 teams so far over the course of 2 years.
Wild. That's wild.
And yeah, I mean, in terms of culture, like, again, getting, Launchpad is kind of the crystallization of the culture of AirMiners. And we want to have this collaborative, light, fun, and breezy thing going. We want to have people able to interact with each other. That's why we have them buddy up with another team and just learn about what that other team is doing. And that carries forward to some stuff we like to do in the main community as well. That's why we designed Ideas, Needs, and Leads, our new program, where people can talk about a particular topic, bring an idea that they have in mind, share what they need to have that idea, get to the next step, and then hopefully other people on that meeting will have a lead to share with them.
How important is goofiness to AirMiners? Is that just you and Tita? Adina, I don't know well enough at this point. I would like to know
Yeah.
Adina well enough to see the goofiness. I don't think I've seen it yet. But
yeah.
Is that just the mix of us, or is that part of AirMiners?
No, it's part of AirMiners.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, the puns are a feature, not a bug. But no, I mean, look, we deliberately want to keep it light, fun, and breezy. As I said before, I mean, because otherwise the anxiety about climate can just weigh things down. And
I mean, it's a monumental task. What we're trying to do at AirMiners is a monumental task.
Yeah. I mean, look, we want to remove 1 billion tons of CO2 and its equivalent from the atmosphere by the end of 2030. That's a lot. As we say, I mean, that if we emit 40 billion tons into the atmosphere every year, 1 billion tons goes up every 9 days. And we want to have that cumulative 1 billion tons removed by the end of 2030. And even that's a lot. But that's going to be the most difficult 1 billion tons. The best antidote to just feeling so fraught about that is to just chill out and go and understand that this can be daunting. But you know what? We're gonna choose how we react to that challenge, and be damned, we're gonna do it. And my personal view is, I think we're gonna get there sooner than anyone ever thinks. I really do.
It's nice to hear that, because this summer has been discouraging. And then I think by the time this airs, the Jeff Goodall show that I just did on The Heat Will Kill You First will be out. And that book is not optimistic. Good timing for Jeff, though. I mean, this summer has been nuts.
Yeah.
So I think the reality of climate change is starting to be apparent even to people who may not have intellectually realized it. They can see it in their bodies and their direct environment now.
Yeah, and certainly wildfires where Ross, you and I live in Washington State is reality, has been reality for years.
It's terrible too.
Same with Oregon and California. Now we're seeing wildfire smoke affect, checking notes here, the East Coast, Boston, New York, Washington D.C., the Midwest, Detroit, Chicago, Indiana. The
Unusual to say the least. Yeah.
Yes. On the other hand, that can motivate action. And we're seeing, so I do some side work with the Open Air Collective, and we are seeing, greater interest in state level policies for carbon removal in particular and climate more generally. So, you have a perturbation to a system, you see a reaction to it. And the reaction is we're going to roll up our sleeves and do something. And that's really the ethos we want to infuse into AirMiners.
What's the relationship between AirMiners and Open Air Collective? Because they're peer organizations.
Yeah.
The distinction is maybe harder to pin down.
Yeah. I would say we are focused more on particular startup teams and getting them off the ground and moving. Open Air Collective has kind of distinct missions in mind. One is the DIY DAC system, the CYAN system, CYAN system in particular, and also policy advocacy at the local, state, and national level. AirMiners doesn't play so much in that area, nor do we have our own, collective technology that we're building as a community. Instead, we see the connections that people foster among themselves as the product that we put out there.
Yeah, huge overlap, though, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, he said there's like 2,200 people in AirMiners, a couple thousand people at Open Air Collective. Newsflash, there's a lot of overlap between those two. Surprise.
I didn't even consider that possible. So the number is even smaller. It's even a smaller group of carbon removal people.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What an obvious thing to overlook. And wow. Okay, so it's even less of us dominating the climate story, like
dominating the story.
Yeah, but like I said, I think it captures the imagination. Again, carbon removal can capture the imagination because it's a way of turning the narrative on its head.
Yeah, as opposed to like making incremental changes in the cost curve of renewables, or like electrifying the grid, electrifying. They're less sexy stories.
Well, actually, it depends on who you talk to. I mean, I would say that I'm amazed that like the solar cost curves now are, I think we're like 30 years ahead of where people anticipated we would be only like 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for my statement earlier about how we're going to get there sooner than people think in carbon removal is owing to efficiencies of scale as we deploy based on curves like that. Greg Nemeth at University of Wisconsin has done some amazing work on this. But what I see is that like we've only really scratched the surface of what carbon removal could be, what the industry could be. And I see a way of expanding it and opening it.
I'm not dissing it, just for the record, just that for the average person who's maybe not already into climate change, thinking like, well, we could reverse climate change versus we're going to like adapt and also slow it down. Like one of those stories is better than the other two. And it's definitely that we can reverse it. It's optimistic. Like the optimism built in there is like really powerful.
And that's what, to be honest, that's coming full circle, to what you started off with. That's what drew me to the podcast. Like, wow, we can reverse this. No kidding. Oh, and I can have, and you as a person, as an individual, can have a hand in that at a very early stage. Well, yes, you can. Okay, let's do this.
It's not even that hard to get involved at this point either. Like there's not that like there's a lot of interest, VC funding, there's corporate interest in these things. There seems like the Kiloton Fund, like you guys are doing, there's more opportunities than there's ever been, but it's also not so like if I wanted to break into AI at this point, I'd be like, oh God, I'm way behind. I can't do it. There's like enough openings for all sorts of different career types within carbon removal. So like it feels open and accessible to me in a way that many other nascent fields do not. You agree? Yeah.
Yeah, yes. And that's again part of the culture that we want to build, that there's ways of people getting into the field that again we owe it to the industry to make it easy for people to get that, again, in Bootup in particular, to have that grounding of knowledge before they start to
critical.
embark.
Critical. And I also think you definitely put out there at AirMiners that you like AirMiners has an ethos of we want you here, like please come, like,
Yes.
and I think that's not true of every communities, whether Slack community or in real life communities. And for example, I really got into AirMiners. I'd heard of AirMiners because I knew Tito personally.
Right.
But then Tito put out a call on his newsletter, which I happen to have been subscribed to, or I'm still subscribed to, and said, hey, we have a gender problem. And like, we want to fix it. And he wasn't like, I have all the answers or I know what I'm going to do about this. But he said, I recognize there's a problem. Do people want to help me fix this? And myself, and I know Anjali Underwood and some other women reached out and were like,
yep,
yeah, we could help with that.
Yep.
And that's one example. But then I think, there's other examples where it's like, well, we need, to focus on environmental justice. Does somebody want to help with that? And people just kind of step forward. And so I do think there's this proactiveness at AirMiners saying like, we want you to be here and we recognize that it's imperfect and we're not saying everything's figured out. Come help us figure it out, which I think is really powerful as an invite to people.
Yes. I mean, look, we're also open to, as you mentioned, Siobhan, starting new channels like the Women Plus AirMiners channel, the Environmental Justice channel. We started a methane channel. Again, because we're air miners, not carbon miners, mind you. So, so there are all sorts of ways. If you feel like there's something that's underrepresented in the atmospheric greenhouse gas removal discourse, we want to hear about it. And plus one to your statement, look, gender diversity is something that we want to work on and have an effect on, because again, there's numerous studies out there. McKinsey did a study not too long ago that more teams with more diverse backgrounds have better outcomes.
And I think you see that at the Launchpad, though. I think you have a pretty geographically disparate bunch of teams, and I would say that again, not perfect, but every time there is an imperfection, I think the energy is like, okay, let's solve it then. Let's come together and fix it, as opposed to being like, well, that's not really a problem, or we'll deal with that later. It's kind of like, no, let's deal with this now. Come here, all hands on deck. Let's do this. And I like that energy a lot. And it invites a lot of people in.
Yeah. I mean, really, time's the one non-renewable resource that we have. And so the quicker we can get to solving these problems, the better. And that's why to your point, I mean, we have a geographically diverse set of teams in Launchpad from India, from Brazil, from Europe. I mean, that's just enhanced rock weathering companies. We've seen biochar all over the planet, from Latin America, in Africa, in Sri Lanka, in North America, Europe, and direct air capture companies. I mean, all the different methods of carbon removal are well represented. All the different geographies are well represented. I mean, we even had a team, we've graduated a team from New Zealand, a team from Australia who got up at some ungodly hour of the morning.
Poor people.
I know. Yeah, well, yeah. But we hold for those listening, we hold the sessions at 9 a.m. U.S. Pacific time. So you can do the math as to when that would be for certain people in certain areas of the world. But people come and do it. And
people show up,
and we're thankful for it. It must be the music that we play at the start. At least I like to think.
Definitely that. I really like
Jason's a great DJ, people. Jason's a great DJ. And surprising too. Like, he drops surprises in there.
Well, yeah. I mean, some of them are obvious. Like when we did ocean alkalinity enhancement, we led in with Megan Trainor, all about the bass.
Oh,
because
it's
it's
so
all
bad.
about the base.
Alkalinity. Yeah.
You know, with the MRV for seaweed sinking, we said, you know, we had an octopus's garden by the Beatles. I like to be under the sea.
I think it's about time to start wrapping this up. What do you think?
Have we gone off the deep end?
No, it's okay.
But AirMiners,
Well,
again,
also
coming
appropriate
back
for
to
an ocean for ocean stuff to go.
oh, hell, unintentional pun. I think though, but that's coming back to the idea of like AirMiners being kind of just like a fun, lighthearted space. Like you initiated the memes channel, or like Tito and Asa, some combination thereof.
Oh, sure.
But that's like the whole reason we make memes at Thanks a Ton. Why
That was
we
a
make
big start
memes,
for
you know,
sure. Yeah.
for
Yeah,
sure.
it-
You know, and just like bringing
yeah.
that levity into the space.
Yeah, and it showed up in our Kiloton Fund FAQ event yesterday, which you can see the recording of on our YouTube channel. With you know, with Timo's Thomas Morgan's graphic of diver being eaten by shark, or about to be eaten by shark, about to be eaten by, you know, ginormous shark, you know, with CO2 being eaten by Kiloton Fund, being eaten by Megaton Fund.
Wow, he's just sucking up
So-
real hard, huh? I think of him as TMO too, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but look, the memes are important because they show a levity, they show a you know, a willingness to accept new ideas that you don't often see elsewhere, and it shows that, you know, we're willing to be vulnerable, we're willing to try new things, we're willing to go out there and do something new and interesting, different, despite all the odds, and to dedicate ourselves to that end.
Spaces without humor are dead, in my opinion. And
I think we're a biased audience, Ross, but yes, I'm with you.
but I carry that with me everywhere, and I prefer to be having fun and joking, and everything can be funny if done in the right kind of spirit. I think many, or at least many things can be with the right kind of spirit. And I feel like that is taking yourself less seriously.
Yes.
Work easier, even when the work is really hard and really serious.
Yes.
At least for me, like, it's an adaptation strategy that works.
Yes. At some level, it is a bit of a coping mechanism, but like I said, but it also can get, you know, creative juices firing in a way that, in the way that they wouldn't otherwise. You know,
Right.
I mean,
Let's talk about our
know,
families of origin now. What was it like for you, and why is humor so important to you, in the way that you grew up and how your parents treated you or neglected you?
okay, should I get a couch now so you can so I can sit, so I can lie
Tell
down?
me about your mother. Another
Right.
Cigar is not a cigar. Blah blah blah. Okay, we've exhausted all of the classics, Jason. Now answer the damn question.
So where did I grow up? So I grew up in the state of Massachusetts, in the North Shore, and you know,
You better be getting to some real stuff here real fast. Okay, let's move past.
Look, I always was the you know, my friends growing up were always the oddballs with like this, you know, strange like Monty Python sense of humor and stuff like that. But people who've known me even from like first and second grade know that the puns are part of the whole, that the sense of humor is part of the whole, is part of the whole thing. It's me. It's authentically genuine.
What's your favorite Python though? Not just film, but like either sketch or joke. What's the one that remains with you? I know it's hard. There's so many. I grew up watching Flying Circus and the movies too. Siobhan, did you like Python?
Yeah. I do, yeah.
Man,
It's on a rabbit.
That's a tough question. I didn't expect sort of Spanish Inquisition here.
Oh, there you go. I mean, that's great for sure.
Well done.
Very
Yeah.
smart and very stupid at the same time. Like whenever we talk in Meme Lab, I'm always looking for the combination of the very smart and the very stupid. And when a joke hits that for me is sublime. That's what Python is like the best at it. They will take they're all like Oxbridge people, right?
Yes.
And they're doing very stupid things, very, very stupid things. That combination. Sorry to go on a rant, but Python.
Genius.
Hey, look, it's all good. I even have a rabbit. It's not just any ordinary rabbit, mind you. It's got nasty big pointy teeth. So yes.
What do you think like
I
the
saw
vulnerability? What do you think like the vulnerability aspect is? I just when you talk about carbon removal, it's such a burgeoning industry.
Yes.
We know a lot, but we know so little.
Right.
And so I think like coming back to kind of the vulnerability and the humility within carbon removal is pretty crucial. And I think AirMiners does a good job about that. How do you think about approaching like what you know versus what you don't know? And how do you share that with the world?
So I would say that we don't, again, if we approach the community with the thought that, look, we know a lot of the other people in the community, but we don't have all the answers ourselves. And, you know, oftentimes like I feel questions, do you know someone who knows about this or that or the other thing? And, you know, if I know someone who can who's a direct connection for that, sure. But a lot of the time I just don't know the answer. If they're looking for something that's a little bit more detailed or obscure. So I'll say, look, you can ask me or you can put it in the general channel. You can ask one person, you can ask 2,200 people, get 2,200 sets of eyes on this. And I think the one, long-term thing that we're cognizant of is that as the community grows, that it's going to be a little bit more challenging for people to put themselves out there.
Totally.
It's easier to have that dynamic when there's only 400 people. It's more difficult when there's 5 times as many, 6 times as many people as when you started, because there's so many different eyeballs on the screen, and we want to have people know that this is a safe space. We have a code of conduct, for instance, that we share with everybody when they join. We have a kind of this email drip campaign that goes out that, 1 week after they join, they get an email. 2 weeks after they join, they get another email. 3 weeks after they join, they get another email with like little nuggets, like here's our member list, here's our code of conduct, here's our where the list of all the channels are, that sort of thing. So getting people into that engaged mindset is crucial at the start. We talked to people who are involved in other communities elsewhere when we started, maybe it's like 3 years ago now, when we started to really lean into the community aspect of it. And what was apparent then is that getting people on board and engaged within that first 30 days, or even, or as soon as you get in, that's important. And that's why whenever anyone joins, I always send them a message. Hey, hit me up if you want to have a one-on-one. Feel free to introduce yourself in there, to have that little bit of nudge, that little bit of encouragement is a way to get people out of their
lurking.
Yeah. I mean, the other, exactly. The other thing that you probably that is quite interesting about the community, I find, is that the vast majority of the traffic in the Slack itself is not public. That really drawing back the veil here is that after I went in, I go in and every month I look at how many messages were exchanged in Slack, and then I exclude all the ones between Tito and me and Deborah Greywolf, our operations assistant, and Adina. And of the non-administrative Slack messages, something like only 25% of them are public in the public channels. So there's a lot of DMing out there among people, and we want to keep that up because it suggests that there's a lot of activity, a lot of sharing happening and we look, all we know is that there's messages happening. We can't, obviously we can't read it, but we just see the traffic levels of people who are sharing stuff underneath the surface.
Kind of makes sense though, because if I'm not going to email somebody who's in AirMiners, I'm just going to DM them, know. So I think there's a lot of that. Yeah, it makes sense. Now that you say that out loud, I'm like, oh yeah, because I do that a lot. I'm DMing people a lot, but maybe not necessarily posting a question unless it's something that I didn't get answered via DM. So I'm like, okay, I'll just pose this to the general public. But that's interesting.
Yeah. So again, people are are willing to share, especially in a direct messaging, in a direct messaging format, but also the channels. I mean, there's smaller audiences in the channels. So if you're interested in, say, ocean CDR or DAC or environmental justice or women plus air miners, you can have that corner of the Slack, which is tailored to that discussion. By the way, when Tito and I think about community, Slack is a tool. To be very clear, Slack is one of the many things that we do. We consider the events to be part of major community activity because it's a convening of people. By the way, they're not webinars. We don't term them as webinars. They are events. And there's a reason we have them on Zoom meeting instead of Zoom webinar, so that we can engage. I mean, subtle things like that we feel can go a long way to improving the feeling of engagement and the ability to have people share their stories with others.
How those meetings change now that you're getting such high volumes, and like, how do you like, I feel like sometimes crowd control can be challenging in the questions and whatnot. You get some characters within the community.
Actually,
how has that changed for you?
Yeah, so we've only noticed real any problems like early on before Zoom improved its security settings.
Wow.
So to date, yeah, I mean, we will look if people have background noise in the audience, we'll go in and mute them. But that doesn't happen that often, to be honest. We are happy to see a flourishing chat that goes on in the middle of the in the middle of the presentation, in the middle of the discussions. By the way, there's a reason why we focus on the discussion, because the community is there to hear what the people have to say, not necessarily to see slides that are being presented, because that can just turn people off, and you can get slides anywhere. And also, logistically makes for a little bit makes for a little bit of challenge, because people are always going to ask, "Can I see the slides? I want to see the slides. I want to see the slides. Where are the slides?" Afterwards. Anyway, but yeah, the focus is on the focus is on the discussion. We feel like having a lively conversation among the panelists and the moderator is what keeps people focused on that, rather than just going off into the ether and having shall we say, bad actors do bad actor things.
I just feel like the chat is almost like most conferences. The main value is not the presentation, but the hallway conversations. And I've often had a lot of fun, and it's almost like when you doodle, you're more engaged. It's not like your teacher is scolding you, saying you're not paying attention. In some ways, that like discussing it real time often helps retain information. Whenever I go to events, I'm always in the chat too. Like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. Again, because you're not just sitting there listening and processing. You're thinking about what you would want to add into the conversation. Like there's some statistic out there that we only retain a small fraction of the things that we hear, or a small fraction of the things that we see, but the things that we contribute to and the things that we especially teach others about, that's where you retain the most memory of a particular topic.
It's definitely true. I've listened to thousands of books, and sometimes it ends up being like, after thousands of pages, being like, wow, Hannah Arendt thinks evil is bad. And you're like clearly there's more to it than that. I don't know at all. It was great listening, but
there is more to it than that. Don't call me Shirley.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it had to go there. Yeah, but I would agree with that as well. And there's something about, if you want to talk about literary preferences, I mean, there's something about like a work of fiction. Like if you read something in like chapter 1 or 2, you never know if it's going to pop up in like chapter 14 later. Whereas, look, I'm a history. I have a history degree as do you, Ross. So I've read my share of, certainly my share of nonfiction, but yeah, whereas in a history book of that the narrative just kind of builds from event 1 to event 2 to event 3 to event 4. It's more of a cumulative thing that you see along the way, arriving at a conclusion at the end.
It's funny how history, especially when you read it, the sense of contingency is often lost too. I think we've talked a little bit before, but It's like, oh, this obviously there's like a one-to-one relationship of causality here, when actually it's chaos and it's storytelling, and historiography has people fighting over how to actually practice history in the first place.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Well, the great thing about history is people are always making more of it. But you know, yeah. But yeah, I mean, you don't know if something's a blip. You don't, when you're in it, in the moment, you don't know if it's an anomaly, if it's the start of a trend, if it's the end of a trend.
Say the Zhu Enlai quote that everyone always says when this topic comes up.
Oh yeah. What's the impact of the French Revolution? It was asked in the the 1970s, 1980s, and as Zhou Enlai, the premier of China, like, what's the impact of the French Revolution? At that point, he said, "Yeah, it's too soon to tell." Cryptic.
It's a great, like, kind of gnomic statement to make that everyone's like, genius. That's such a smart thing to say. One can only hope to utter such a gnomic, excellent statement like that.
Yeah. I mean, look, it comes up in terms of culture as well. I mean, Grant Faber posed in AirMiners like a couple years ago, like, what would be in the carbon removal museum based on what we're seeing now. And I'm curious about
That's a great question.
Yeah, it is. It is, because we are writing kind of this the history of an early stage industry as it unfolds. And one of my side projects for lowly 20 years from now, after when I'm doing goodness knows what, but I would be interested in putting my undergraduate degree to good use and writing something about the early history of a potentially world-changing industry, because I feel like the carbon removal unicorns are being formed now, and we have a front row seat to seeing it happen and learning from them, and maybe imparting that knowledge and insight to future people who might find it useful in their own pursuits.
How could you even start? Because we don't know. I mean, certainly we have front runners of the carbon removal industry that we now think are going to be the future unicorns. But I mean, many a slip between the cup and the lip kind of deal. Like, who knows what's going to happen? Like, it wouldn't surprise me if
Right.
in like the dark horse now all of a sudden pulls ahead, and something that everyone's dissing on is like, oh, this is actually the most scalable, cheapest, most just option that we overlooked the entire time.
Right. Just to save nothing. Well, look. I don't think it's going to be just one method that rules them all. I highly
this
doubt
statement
that.
might go into the museum as a greatest wrong prediction of early carbon removal. when the one technology,
right. Well, yeah. What was the IBM executive's statement in like the 50s or something, that I think there's space for like 1,000 computers in the whole world ever. Look, we don't know. I mean, 100 years ago there were, 100 years ago there were like dozens and dozens and dozens of automotive companies, and now, at least in Detroit, there's the big three. There's major Asian and European manufacturers, and and now Tesla grew up. Also, like 100 years ago, Charles Lindbergh hadn't even flown over the Atlantic Ocean. And actually, I looked this up the other day. Apparently, like, get this, like, sliced bread didn't even happen until like 1928 or 1930. So, when people say it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, maybe sliced bread hasn't been developed yet.
Yeah, or it's in 100 years. That's the most important invention that we've had in 100 years.
Right.
That seems like a great ironic overstatement. Yeah, fair enough. Like, but like sitting here now, like, what would be the most important? I think the stock photo of Dak, that's going in.
Oh yeah, the Hinway, shiny Dak plant on a hill. Yeah,
that's our reserve joke. There's the South Park, when they can't come up with ideas, they're like, we've always got crab people. We can always go to the crab people. That's like our Dak image. We always got the Dak image. People. Just throw it in there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is actually, from a public relations standpoint. I mean, CDR, if you want to talk nomenclature, just about every week I'm on a call when people equate CDR with direct air capture only. And look, this is not to diss on direct air capture in any way, shape, or form, or what Climeworks has achieved in any way, shape, or form, because we love what Climeworks is doing. We love its direct air capture. segment of carbon removal is doing. But oftentimes for people who are newer to carbon removal, they equate, well, carbon removal is just direct air capture. No, it's a lot more than that. And it's our job to better educate.
So what goes in the museum?
Yeah, what goes in the museum?
Yeah, you're like a professional dodger of my questions. I'm asking you about your relationship with your parents, what goes in the museum, talking about
what goes in the museum. Sure. How about the first AirMiners event recording? How about, or from the first AirMiners conference?
Who's even in there? There's probably like just out of your cohorts, the number of people there who are going to be like very rich, powerful, influential people 5-10 years from now, probably pretty high.
Oh, from our first conference?
Or just like your ongoing events though, like there are future like world changers in there, like almost
the Launchpad teams.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I'd like to think so, crossing fingers. I mean, one never knows. I mean, that's the beauty of being at an early stage, being able to help people out in a way as being kind of the gatekeeper that to have an influence that carries forward and giving people a leg up at the start.
What if we put you in there like we did you like Lenin being preserved where people could visit his body? What if we stuck you in there?
Well, I'm a capitalist, so no. But
are there any capitalists who have done that? I guess Mao and Lenin are the only people who have been embalmed for public, except maybe saints. I guess. Are you a saint? You feel saintly?
Oh goodness, no.
No, you don't want your bones in the reliquary. You don't want
yeah. No. Like you go to Hungary and they've got the hand of Saint Stephen that they cut off and is on display because like Saint Stephen, I think the patron saint of Hungary or something like that. No, I would not want for that.
Podcast got weird. What do you think, Siobhan? What should go in the time capsule or into the museum?
Going off the rails here. I think it would be interesting to have a museum for carbon removal, because something we struggle with in the industry is the lack of like visual, tangible, museum quality items, right? Like we struggle with that, I think, as an industry in doing this very tangible service. It's physically being done, and it's very like the mechanics of it are very real. But the end product is so ephemeral.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why we need something more, why we need something more tangible. That like the first it would be tough to get the first pyrolyzer out there, or because
stuff it in.
Because biochar has been around for just so darn long. I think something that something from I know what would be good, like your very first Nori podcast.
This is all just bait for praise, and I'm glad you took it. Thank you. I accept.
It would just be Ross's voice droning on in the museum.
I think it was Ross. I think it was Ross and Paul in that very first podcast, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think Christoph was. I think all of the people we did our first hackathon with, that we came out of. So there's several like co-founders who weren't and like decided to go a different direction. But
right.
Yeah. I cringe to go back and listen to that. But
yeah. Like first, maybe first email we sent out for our very first conference. Something from each of the different methods, like something from a DAC plant, something from a biochar, something from ocean alkalinity stuff, something from something from like
a rock.
What's that? Yeah, enhanced rock weathering. Yes, exactly. Something from Olivine from Project Vesta would be interesting.
One of the first things I saw was touring Klaus Lackner's research lab and his moisture swing. That could be fun. That's pretty early.
Oh yeah, well, Klaus. I mean, look, the Open Air Collective makes T-shirts with Klaus on them. So,
are they sainted? Does he have the halo behind him?
I don't know. You'd have to ask the Open Air Collective folks. But yeah,
Klaus, patron saint of carbon removers. That's what we need. I think we need our own. Okay, yeah. I'm also thinking.
Okay, it's going off the rails now.
Yeah.
Jason, Ross always tells me that we should end the podcast one question before the stupidest question we have.
I have not yet become
There are no stupid
questions.
There are no stupid there are no stupid questions. So in theory, we could go on forever.
We could go on forever. We could. I would love to talk to you forever, Jason. It's just such an enjoyable conversation.
Thanks. No, I enjoy being on with you both, and hope this was helpful to other people in carbon removal. Again, final reminder that we'd love to hear more from you if you're in the community, or if you're not in the community. Feel free to contact me at jason@airminers.org.
Always the biggest promoter or one of them for AirMiners. You should do Bootup. It's really great. I would probably like to just go back through and do it, because I feel like there's stuff that I've forgotten over time or lost sight of, or there's just so much new information.
Or that's changed. Yeah. I feel like I did Bootup when it was just like a list of articles that John Sanchez had put together, like before it actually became
I remember
Bootup.
those days too.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I actually never got to go through Bootup and chat with people, and so I'm like, maybe I should do it just to, like, refresher.
And look, it's a constantly evolving process as well. I mean, look, we're never done. We're always iterating on ways to make Bootup better. We're always iterating to make our other programs better, and to even at that find new programs. And I'm just really grateful to have had some small part in what I hope is going to be world changing. So thank you all and thank you to everyone in the community for everything you do every single day. Really appreciate it.
Be sure to check out Bootup if you haven't, and AirMiners Launchpad if you're ready to go through an accelerator with your carbon.
August 11th, deadline coming up.
Sneaking up on you. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks for being here, Jason.
Thank you so much for listening. If you could please subscribe and give us a great rating and review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify, that'd be much appreciated. It helps us get our content out to more people. You can sign up for our newsletter at nori.com, follow us on social media, and we will catch you next time.